I could, I'd have Dave Bolin come back up and do his alliterative sentence, but.
Good morning, Chair Marcus. Christopher Stevens, Supervising Engineer with Division of Financial Assistance, here to talk a little bit about item 6 on your agenda today. This is a resolution to authorize the Deputy Director of the Division of Financial Assistance to provide financing to the Sacramento County Regional Sanitation Agency for their Echo Water project. I think you're generally familiar with the history of the project, so I won't go into huge detail on the project itself, but just to summarize, the main purpose of the project is to help the district meet the nitrogen and pathogen objectives set by the regional board. The district has requested about $1.6 billion in financing. That's for the project. It'll be broken up into 8 construction phases. Currently the schedule calls for that to take place over the next 7 years or so. In many respects, this project is very much like hundreds of other projects that have been financed by the SRF, but there are a couple of atypical aspects of the project, and so I just want to focus for a couple of minutes on the special conditions included in the resolution to try to deal with those aspects. The district made 2 specific requests. One was that the interest rate currently in effect today, which is 1.6%, apply to the entire project. Of course, the SRF is not in the business necessarily of making money, but you know, most projects, when they come to us, it's one project, it's approved, and when we write the agreement, we set the interest rate, and of course, if we were to do that for all of these projects, it would certainly have an effect on the earnings of the fund. That is important to the fund, and of course interest rates do change over time. So over the next 3 or 4 or perhaps even longer period of time, as these 8 agreements get executed, you know, those interest rates could change, and so it is important for us to take into consideration what the earnings would be on those agreements at the time they're executed. Of course, the district is concerned about having some certainty in what the cost of the project is going to be, and I can certainly understand that. So what staff has proposed as a sort of middle ground there is that the interest rates would be set at the time we write the individual agreements, but it would be capped at the 10-year average interest rate, which is about 2.3%. The district, of course, has other debt, and they have in place a master indenture that they use when they go out into the bond market. One of the aspects of that master indenture is what they call the additional debt test. So it's a test that they run to decide, you know, can they go out and take on additional debt. The debt test is very similar to the debt test in the Clean Water SRF program, but they calculate it slightly differently to account for variable debt. So we've taken a look at that, and we feel comfortable that that provides the SRF with sufficient security, and so therefore we would recommend that the board use their existing debt test and accept that as part of the financing agreement. Of course, you know, $1.6 billion is quite a lot of money. And that is by far the largest project that would ever be financed by the SRF program, probably 4 times larger than any other project that the SRF has financed. So cash flow is definitely something that, you know, keeps me up at night sometimes. And so I think it's important that we recognize this could have a dramatic effect on the cash flow of the program. And so we've put in a couple of conditions there to try to deal with that. Number 1, the district would be required to update their cash flow spending forecast for us on a quarterly basis. And more importantly, if they want to accelerate that spending, they would need to give us at least 90 days notice of that, and that would have to be approved by the Deputy Director of the Division of Financial Assistance. So if they spend money more slowly, that's not as big a problem. If they want to spend money more quickly, obviously we need to manage that, and we need to be aware of that.
My assumption is that they completely understand that issue and problem.
All of these conditions we've shared with them in advance, so they're aware of those. Yes. Of course, another aspect of the the large dollar amount here is that we will probably, as a consequence of making this commitment, need to go into the bond market ourselves on a more regular basis. And so we put a condition on here that any future project phases would need to meet applicable tax-exempt financing rules. You know, whether we would finance it with tax-exempt revenue bonds is an open question at this point. We want to keep that option available to us. Two more conditions here, and then I'll wrap up. One condition that we have to pass through, it's a federal requirement since the SRF program does get federal money. One of the federal rules is that if an environmental analysis document is more than 5 years old at the time we execute the financing agreement, then there needs to be a reevaluation of that analysis document. And so, again, depending upon how the schedule goes, you know, it may or may not be an issue there, but it's something that we really don't have any discretion over. We need to pass that through to the applicant. That's another condition. And then last condition here is, of course, Congress and the state legislature may change the rules for the SRF program. And so we've put in there that the board reserves the authority to pass those new conditions onto the project if they come in the future. So with that, I understand that the district chief engineer will have a few comments, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Samavarapu.
Morning, Chair, members of the board. My name is Prabhakar Samavarapu. I'm the district engineer for Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District. I want to first of all appreciate staff for working with us. As Chris has mentioned, this is the largest single loan that the board has ever embarked on. Just a little history of who we are, and then I'll mention a couple of things that I think should help alleviate any concern you may have related to the cash flow. We serve 1.4 million people in Sacramento region. Those of you that have an apartment or a house here, you're our ratepayer, thank you. As Chris was mentioning, this all dates back to the 2010 discharge permit, which required us to remove ammonia and also filter our effluent, which we do not do at this point. We estimate the project cost to be between $1.5 and $2.1 billion, and the most recent estimate is roughly around $1.83 billion. And it's very uncertain because we can't project far in advance of these projects what the bidding climate is and so forth. So far, the bids that we have opened have come in just slightly below our estimates, which is a good thing. And we hope to retain that environment going forward. This is the largest project the county has ever embarked on. This is broken into 12 construction projects with the differing start times and completion times. The requirement for us is to complete by May 2023 is the filtration. We have to complete the ammonia part of it by May 2021. The two big ones, the ammonia nitrate removal is estimated to, just the construction side of it is over $700 million. And the filtration and enhanced disinfection is estimated over $500 million. There's a multiple smaller projects that are in support of these things that have to be done. That's what adds up, including the soft costs and so forth, round up to be about $1.8 billion at this point. Just a couple of staggering statistics of this project. When the peak hits, the construction just started. We have our board, if you have been reading Sacramento B, that we were sued by a couple of the contractors because of the way our board awarded the contract. We awarded $150 million worth of contracts just about a month ago. And when we start the construction, heavy construction peak starts, we're expecting 600 additional workers to be on site every day. And our construction expenditure would be about $1 million a day during that period, which is by any stretch, it's a big endeavor for us. So what did the district do to earn your confidence in terms of the, our financial viability in doing it. Back when the permit was issued in 2010, our rate was $20 a month. And our board has been very proactive in embarking on rate increases. And we are today at $29 a month, and the 2 more rate increases have already been put in place. The one will go into effect on July 1st. We'll bring it to $32 a month, and then July 1st, 2016, will go up to $35. Subsequent rate increases
I'm
are
assuming that's the average rate?
average.
Average rate or a flat rate?
It's a single-family home that pays $35 just for the regional sanitation. So if you were to live in, for example, the city of Sacramento, you add an extra $20 for the collection side of things. So it'll be, today is about $49 if it were to be in the city of Sacramento. And because we serve from West Sacramento all the way to east to Folsom, there are different jurisdictions that have their own local collection rates. So ranging from $6 in the West Sacramento to around $20 in a couple of agencies that provide sewage for us. So far, the board has already approved 75% rate increases, taking from $20 to $35. We have excellent cash flow. We have not had a default, and we hope we will never have one. And we've got a very good rating history. And we were projecting back in 2010 when we were embarking on this project, our $20 rate would have to go to mid-60s. But because of the cost containments that the district has done through the pilot projects and so forth, we're now projecting from mid-40s to low 50s. And I would suspect by your approval today, I think we could lower that even more because it does help with us to get the loan as opposed to getting to the market, which we've already done a portion of our bonds. We've issued $150 million worth of bonds late last year, not knowing whether we would be successful entirely here, so to manage the cash. Now, in terms of helping manage cash in terms of how you can spread the debt issuance on your part, because of the rate increases that we've already implemented, we are generating cash, and we can be flexible in terms of we can use our cash to pay and then submit the reimbursement. There's enough flexibility for us to work with the staff. So that, I think, is a big positive. So a couple of highlights. As we talked earlier, this is the largest single block of financing. We expect with the 2.3% cap, we expect to save over $500 million in interest in the life of the loan. And it's a significant benefit to the ratepayers. Obviously, the ratepayers have been asked to fund entirely this massive project, so I think the benefit coming from the state board, obviously from the federal government, is very important to us. Last but not least, I want to emphasize the collaborative work that we had with the staff. They've been excellent to work with. I haven't found more willing folks to work with in my 25-year history. So that's great I would like to report to you.
Interesting. People think of the Water Board as water rights, water quality regulation, now drinking water regulation, but our Division of Financial Assistance and Funding is the unsung hero of many improvements across all of them.
Certainly they have risen up to that. They have the great marks in my book. So with that, I urge you to approve our loan, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Questions? No engineering questions?
Oh, well, it's lovely to see you,
Engineering
Prabhakar.
wing?
Thank you. Excellent presentation as always. Mr. Stevens, I think we've discussed this, but it might be worth just commenting on briefly. Given the size of the commitment and and the cash flow challenges, but there's tools in our toolbox to address that, as you pointed out. But is there any concern of our ability to fund other large infrastructure projects that are needed to protect water quality and ensure water supply reliability? So how does this large commitment affect our overall capacity?
Well, that's a difficult question to make a prediction about, but certainly to look at, again, it depends a lot on how quickly the cash goes out the door, but there certainly is the potential for that to affect our ability to finance other large projects. On the flip side of that is, yes, we have the ability to go into the bond market. Maybe it's a short-term thing that we have to manage. WIFIA, the recently passed WIFIA last year, is starting to gear up, and that will certainly be something that I'm keeping an eye on, and maybe something as a way to coordinate and help ameliorate some of those impacts. Yeah, the Clean Water SRF has provided in the neighborhood of $7.5 billion in financing over the last 22 years. So it is a powerful financing vehicle, but it does have its limitations. And so that is something definitely that we have to manage.
Good, that's a good discussion. But I do want to acknowledge SAC Regional Plant and Prabhakar's leadership and the teamwork that we've had on this, and really your demonstrated commitment to meeting the challenges, with the discharge standards, but also showing leadership and working with the various communities to consolidate and create efficiencies. Would you say that some of that it's difficult to do, but when you get, you gather up the different entities under one roof, are you able to find efficiencies in a project like this?
Oh, I would certainly hope so. The latest testament for that is that West Sacramento decided, instead of expanding and upgrading their treatment plant, decided to join Regional San. Prior to that, there were 22 different treatment plants serving this region and combined into one. I would have to think that if you're asking 22 of them to upgrade, instead you're asking one to upgrade it, there's going to be a economy of scale.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
I do want to add just one more, that you will be getting invitations that we have the official groundbreaking for this project, the Echo Water project, on May 28th. We would expect a fair amount of presence from the local, state, and federal legislators at that event because of the high-profile nature of the project.
I move we adopt the resolution.
I will second, but also want to take this opportunity to thank you and thank your staff. I had the opportunity to visit, I think a month or so ago, and your Director of Operations and also Ms. Mitchell gave me a really nice walkthrough of the facilities and the planned expansion, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing there as a member of the board, but also as a regional sand ratepayer. So thank you very much.
Right, she's the one.
Thank you for the rates, and I missed that. I was out of the country at the time, and I'll make sure to pass your appreciation to Ruben.
Ruben and to Terry as well.
And Terry Mitchell. We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And having gone through my own multi-billion-dollar wastewater upgrade where we had to do rebuild the entire plant while we kept it operating. I mean, you are rebuilding the Ferrari while it's going 70 miles an hour down the highway. I know how complex it is, so all I can offer is if you need a shoulder to complain, then I'm happy to take you out for coffee or a drink. Anytime, that comes with this.
We might take you upon that.
It's exciting, but nerve-wracking and complex. So.
Yeah. Just one more thought, because of what I sat through with all the drought and the discussion, is when this project is done, the entire 150 million gallons of it is available for recycling.
Which is phenomenal.
That's right. Yes. We have projects that are in the works, and some of you are aware of what we're looking at. So.
And that will be available for agricultural areas
and
particular.
residential. It's a tertiary Title 22.
Very exciting.
No, all kinds of things happen when you take it to the next level, that all other things become possible. So it's going to be a great foundation on which to build. All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, carries. Thank you very much. We're now on to item number 7. Oh yeah, folks who are here, we will take a lunch break after this item, so people who are here for item number 8 know that it will not come up until after lunch. I can't tell you exactly when lunch will be, however. So, but you're probably safe until at least 1 or possibly 1:30, so check in. Do you have other things to do? And the cafe closes at 2:45, so be sure to get your food during that lunch break. Yeah, you can still get packaged goods, right? A little bit later? They still have boiled eggs after that? I did not know that. Good.
So glad we got the audio back for the webcast for that discussion.
Hey, we need water, but we need food too. Protein particularly.
I learned something new here today, the 2:45.
Ready to start?
Yes.
Good
sorry.
morning. I'm Okay, good. I'm happy to hear it. I guess it isn't really, it is morning, just barely. I'm Marley Wood with the Office of Chief Counsel. With me is Dr. Maria de la Paz Carpio Obeso with the Ocean Unit, and Paul Hann, who is in charge of watershed, oceans, and wetlands. Mariella will be doing the presentation for you on the next item, which is the compliance date extension for Moss Landing Power Plant pursuant to the once-through cooling policy. I just want to emphasize that most of the presentation you're going to see is background information on the settlement agreement involving claims involving the once-through cooling policy. That settlement did involve a number of staff determinations about compliance with the policy for Moss Landing, but the compliance date extension is the issue that will be before the board for your approval.
So you're giving us context, and the lead up, but the action item is the compliance date.
That is correct. So with that, Mariella will present the item for you.
Thank you, Marley. Chairperson, honorable board members, as Marley already says, completely my name. Thank you. Today, I will bring for your consideration the proposed amendment for the water quality control policy on the use of the coastal and estuary water for power plants cooling, also known as the once-through cooling or OTC policy. Oops. The OTC policy was established to implement the Clean Water Act Section 316B, and this section requires that the location, design, construction, and capacity of the cooling water intake structures reflect the best technology available for minimizing the adverse environmental impacts. The OTC policy was adopted on May 4, 2010, and the policy has been in effect since October 1st, 2010. Once in effect, the OTC policy was, that's the button, okay. The policy was applied for 19 existing power plants, and since then, 2010, several units have retired or repowered in advance of their compliance plan. Currently, we have 6 plants that are in compliance with the policy, such as Morro Bay, Sol Bay, Huntington Beach, Potrero, Contra Costa. The policy is implemented through the National Pollution Discharge Elimination Systems. The OTC policy requires that the owner or operator of the power plant to submit an implementation plan to the State Water Board before April 1st, 2011. This implementation plan must identify the select compliance plan alternative, describe the general design, and the construction of operational measures that will be undertaken to implement the alternative. The policy describes two tracks. Track 1 requires to reduce the intake flow rate by a minimum of 93%, which is the flow reduction feasible with a closed cycle wet cooling system. Track 2 is only allowed when the owner or operator of existing power plant demonstrates that track 1 is not feasible. Under track 2, the plant is required to reduce impeachment mortality and entrainment of marine life for the facility and to comparable level to track 1. It is defined in the policy as a comparable level as the level that achieves at least 90% of the reduction in an impeachment mortality and 93% reduction in flow in the entrainment. Dynegy, owner of the Moss Landing power plant, provide to the Water Board the implementation plan on April 1st, 2011, and this plan concludes that track 1 is not feasible, at least for three main reasons. First, space constraints in the site. Second, inability to obtain air permits. And third, constraints on the plant by previous determinations by the California Energy Commission. Consequently, the compliance with track 2 will require additional time. After the OTC policy was adopted in 2010, Diane, with another 4 owners of power plants, filed a lawsuit against the State Water Resource Control Board. After detailed discussions between the parts, it was signed and a settlement agreement on October 9, 2014. The settlement agreement includes provisions addressing the Moss Landing power plant compliance track, final compliance date, immediately requirements, compliance plan, baseline and technology studies, and compliance monitoring. As part of the agreement, Dynamon submitted an update of the implementation plan for Moss Landing power plant on November 2014. This update describes the compliance alternative of track 2 and provides a schedule for implementing the measures stipulated in the settlement agreement. Some of the settlement agreement elements include the interim mitigation approved, the use of prior flow reduction credit provided in the policy, section 2A2D, and of course, compliance date extension for track 2. As agreed upon the settlement, State Water Board, staff proposed an amendment to the policy to change the final compliance date for Moss Landing power plants from December 31st, 2017 to December 31st, 2020. This proposed amendment will fully resolve litigation challenging the existing policy provisions. After 45 days of public notice, we received comments letters, one from Diane Moss Landing and the other from California Coastkeeper Alliance. Diane conducted studies, including testing the efficiency of various technologies, control alternatives, and will follow the proposed time schedule set up in the settlement agreement. Coastal Keepers Alliance opposed the proposed amendment unless the State Water Resource Control Board will remove the finding that Moss Landing is not feasible to reach track 1. And the other item that they highlighted was that we should put explicit enforcement section that will state that the Moss Landing must stop OTC if they are not in compliance by December 31st, 2020. In conclusion, staff recommends amendment of the OTC policy to extend the compliance date from December 31st, 2017 to December 31st, 2020. With this extension, will provide time to Diane to comply fully with the aspects of the OTC policy. This give us and preserve the leading role that California has taken in advancing in the OTC management. If you have some questions.
Cards, but are there questions, staff? I know you've been briefed. All right. We have two speaker cards. First, Sean Bothwell. I'm sorry we didn't get to you by the morning so you could do your usual, at least, 2 units of the day. From the California Coastkeeper Alliance, followed by Elizabeth Ewens from Dynegy. And tell me if I pronounce that right. Get up here.
Morning, Chair Marcus, board members. My name is Sean Bothwell. I'm the staff attorney for the California Coastkeeper Alliance. We represent 12 California keepers statewide. California Coastkeeper Alliance was also one of the interveners on this case and was part of the settlement discussion along with several of our other water keepers, Heal the Bay, Surfrider, and NRDC. I would like to just start by saying that I understand that the issue before you today is the 3-year time extension and not necessarily the feasibility determination. But we submitted the comments that we did because we felt it necessary for the board to hear our concerns that were brought up during settlement. Our concerns also describe some of the issues with the once through cooling policy, specifically the idea that the feasibility determination can be done with staff without any public comment or any board input on that decision. Our first issue that I want to discuss is the feasibility issue of Moss Landing. Before I get into the specifics, I want to clear up just several things that were in the response to comments, which were fine, but I just want to clear some stuff up. In response 2.1, it was suggested that we were asking for this full, in-depth feasibility analysis, and we aren't. We are only asking that no determination at all be made one way or the other regarding the feasibility of Moss Landing. We just ask that you allow them to use Track 2 through the settlement terms without making any type of finding one way or the other whether they're feasible. Second, the response to comments states that the staff report accurately described the 2011 implementation plan. That's something we agree with, and we said so in our comments. Our issue isn't that with what the staff report said, but that the staff report took that to be truth of what Dynegy said in their implementation plan was accurate, and therefore they weren't feasible. Dynegy relied on the 2000 Energy Commission determination, the 2003 Regional Board decision, and an argument for commercial and equitable considerations to be made. And none of these fit under what is infeasible under the once through cooling policy. They're all cost concerns. The 2000 Energy Commission decision may have looked at some miscellaneous environmental impacts, but as my comments quoted, the basis for their decision was cost considerations, and this was in 2000. In 2003, the regional board did the same thing, found that it wasn't cost effective to do cooling towers, so they didn't require them. That doesn't mean they weren't feasible, and under the once through cooling policy, cost can't be a consideration. Regarding one of the assertions that there's not enough room for Dynegy to do dry cooling towers, I want to read specifically a quote from the regional board report. Quote, closed cooling systems such as mechanical draft cooling towers or dry cooling would provide a significant reduction in entrainment up to 100%. Staff considers these alternatives to be demonstrated available technologies and has little evidence that they could not be installed at Moss Landing. The regional board found that they were feasible to be constructed there, but for cost reasons, they weren't feasible at that time. But those issues were 7 years before the once through cooling policy was adopted, and like I said, the once through cooling policy requires that cost not be a consideration under feasibility. Finally, I wanted to just touch on the enforcement request that we had made. We understand that the state board has full discretion of their enforcement in 2020 when they don't come into compliance. But if you consider the real world implications, I have a hard time believing that we're going to completely have Moss Landing shut down if they don't come into compliance, since they're a baseload facility. And so really it comes to just giving them more extensions till they can prove that they are in compliance. So that's why we asked for a specific, explicit requirement of what the enforcement mechanism would be. What I do know is that you can't require in 2020, if they're not in compliance, you can't require them to go back to cooling towers because of that feasibility determination. And that's why it was such a concern for us, is now you've precluded yourself from using that as a compliance option if they can't comply with track 2. So again, I realize there's not very much that the board can do here today because we're only looking at the 3-year extension, but I thought it was important given what occurred during the settlement negotiations that you heard our concerns, and you consider the overall process or lack thereof of determining that feasibility determination. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask staff to follow up on Sean's last point regarding enforcement. In the response to comment, I believe your response to this particular comment was that the necessary enforcement mechanism would be through the NPDES permit.
That's correct. The once through cooling policy for all the plants that are subject to the policy is implemented through their specific NPDES permits. So we would have the full enforcement authority available pursuant to the water code under NPS permits.
And why would that not suffice, Sean?
What would...
Especially with an NPDES permit.
What I was told was the enforcement would be, there wouldn't necessarily be an injunction to get them to stop. It would just simply be fines until they were able to determine compliance.
So let me jump in. Staff may have insinuated that, I don't know, but we would not have any ability to say what the actual enforcement mechanism. They would have, the regional board would have full injunctive and civil liabilities at their discretion.
But we would expect the terms and conditions and deadlines of the once through cooling policy, if it's amended by the board today, to be incorporated and be complied by, and compliance be achieved through the mechanism of the NPDES permit.
That's correct. And if you felt that the NPDES permit wasn't sufficiently incorporating the policy, then you could take it up on your own motion to modify it.
And when do we expect to see this permit?
Well, I don't have the answer to that because we haven't made a change in the policy, but now that we have, we would expect them to make a modification in their permit requirements.
Could I flag this as an item for staff to report back perhaps in Mr. Howard's Executive Director's report when the Regional Water Board takes this action?
Yes.
Ms. Ewens.
Sorry. My name's Elizabeth Evans. I'm counsel for Dynegy. I'm sorry. Actually, the fault is my husband and his German background. It's spelled Ewens and pronounced Evans, so you're not alone in your confusion at all. Definitely not relevant to why we're here today.
It goes along with the cafeteria closing at 2:45 and eggs.
It's been an educational day. The primary reason I'm standing here is to lend support to the staff recommendation that the board adopt the 3-year extension of the compliance deadline. We concur in all the reasons stated both in comments and in the draft staff report, as well as the comments that were provided today. But in addition, I also wanted to highlight a couple of things, and that's the fact that there are direct environmental benefits that are expected well in advance of even the current compliance date, which is 2017, and very well in advance of the requested extension of the compliance date to 2020. The reality is that Dynegy will be able to meet the requirements under the OTPC policy we expect in 2016, at the end of 2016. The reason for the added time and the requested extension is so that Dynegy can evaluate supplemental technology controls, the efficacy of the supplemental measures, test them, make sure that they're selecting appropriate technologies and that they work. And to address the comments that were just made, and to the extent that there's any doubt that Dynegy will be in compliance, without hesitation, I can represent to you that Dynegy will be in compliance by 2020. If for some completely unforeseen reason that doesn't happen, the board certainly has a whole suite of alternatives available to make sure that Dynegy is in compliance or dealt with accordingly. I also want to just briefly address the comments regarding the track 1, track 2 determination that's been made. That's definitely not before the board today, but I do want to make the record clear that it was not just a cost consideration that led to the track 2 determination, but rather there were other reasons that made the track 2 determination appropriate, and certainly that's that finding that is in the settlement agreement. So if there are no other questions, again, Dynegy is pleased to report that there are actually environmental benefits today, and they're expected to increase between now and the end of 2016.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Evans. Just on that point, though, and going back to the staff slide about the interim mitigation, and to me, conceptually, the idea of the temporal impact of 3 years extension would be addressed through a mitigation package. Is there, and some environmental benefits that would be part of that. Is there anything you can discuss along those lines?
Well, that was an interim mitigation approved. It was already approved. It is because Dynegy was directed to have $7 million for mitigation in a fund regarding a growth foundation, and they already provide that money because that was when the units 1 and 2 were constructed before the OTC policy was adopted.
Okay, so that's part of the history here.
That's part of the history,
Part of the history.
and it's part of the settlement agreement as well as acknowledging those.
And besides that, so they provide around $450,000 for Monterey National Sanctuary in order to have some special studies regarding the thermal impacts in that particular facility.
Contributing to the understanding of the science and that. Any other description of environmental benefit that you want to tell me about?
Well, I think the big issue, Board Member Moore, is the acceleration of the installation of the variable speed pumps at the facility, and the fact that at least some preliminary modeling that our staff had an opportunity to look at indicated that by moving that up, we're likely to see almost the equivalent of compliance with track 2 a year earlier than we would if we were to hold them to the original schedule. And it's going to be very, very close, and when you start to look at the volumes of water involved, it, on balance, seemed like a very good deal to have that in a year earlier, and then perhaps draw it out with the extra 3 years to provide them the opportunity to come into full compliance, which won't necessarily mean the reduction in entrainment and impingement, but the policy does not allow simply reducing the volume of flow to be deemed compliance with track 2, so they will need to do additional efforts at the facility. And that's really what the 3 years is about, not from my perspective. Based on the data that we saw, not 3 years of additional environmental adverse impact associated with once through cooling that's not in compliance with the policy.
I really appreciate that clarification. I think that answers the question.
Other questions or thoughts, particularly you OTC veterans, you?
If there are no other comments, then I will move for adoption of this item.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, it carries. Thank you very much for all of your comments, educational and otherwise. Thanks for all the hard work a lot of folks did on this. We'll now take a lunch break until 1:15. And we'll resume with item number 8. Because she's going to be chairing. We're going to do a makeup call for all the reporters who in and out. Hi there. Nice meeting you. Hi. Oh, cool. So we'll start. Ed. If you're interested, we're back.
Ma'am.
I have to do a press briefing for the folks who didn't hear what happened today, so I have to run upstairs.
Okay, it'll be like just 2 minutes.
All right, I'm going to come around there on my way to the elevator, so just go around outside that door. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, this is my dad, Bill. You were very popular. You have a good time with him, and and then he says, came and said, I'm with my dad. Oh, yes. Okay, let's go. You get a bite to eat. So,